So, hi everyone, I just want to welcome you all here today and thank you all for joining. So my name is Leanne Young and I'm the Marketing and Student Recruitment Executive for the College of Business, Public Policy and Law. So this session today is going to focus on our LLM International Criminal Law and our LLM Peace Operations Humanitarian Law and Conflict programs. So I'm delighted to be joined here today by Professor Shane Darcy and Professor Ray Murphy, our program coordinators. So the format of this session will be as follows. So Professor Ray Murphy will lead us through the introduction, expanding in detail on the Irish Centre for Human Rights, our placement opportunities, and the Irish Law Awards, in which one of our students recently won Law Student of the Year. Following this, Professor Shane Darcy will talk more in detail about the LLM International Criminal Law Programme. We will then come back to Ray for the LLM Peace Operations Humanitarian and Conflict Programme. I'll then briefly talk about the application process and the scholarship opportunities available to applicants. And following on from the presentation, we'll be joined by Pauline, a recent graduate of the LLM in International Criminal Law, in which she'll talk about her experience of the programme. We'll also be joined by a current student of the LLM Peace Operations Humanitarian Law and Conflict Programme. And then finally, we will welcome any questions you may have, and you may do so by putting it into the chat or unmuting yourself at the end. So I'll hand you over to Ray to take over.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for your interest in the Irish Centre for Human Rights, and in particular the International Criminal Law LLM programme and the International Humanitarian Law Peacekeeping Humanitarian Law and Conflict programme. So as Leanne said, I'll be joined soon by Professor Shane Darcy, who will talk about the International Criminal Law programme. But before that, just a few words about the centre, which is part of the NUI Galway School of Law, and it's one of the world's premier academic human rights institutions dedicated to the study and promotion of human rights, international criminal law and humanitarian law. And the centre in its current iteration has been in existence for over 20 years. And we pride ourselves in having a very diverse staff and student body. People come from many different backgrounds and parts of the world, and it's something that really enhances the programs and the experience for anybody that comes to study at the Centre for Human Rights. We provide what we term dynamic programs and seminars. We also have summer schools and conferences, including an annual Galway Business and Human Rights Symposium. So that's in addition to the main modules, which would be an integral part of any program. We have a range of guest speakers and other events. Now, to some extent this year and last year, unfortunately, due to COVID, we've been restricted in some of the things that we would normally have made available to students. But we have replaced much of the in-person experience with the virtual and online events as much as possible. We offer career support, especially towards the end of the program, in terms of advice on the opportunities available when students graduate from the respective programs. We have a great deal of expertise among the lecturers, both academic and practical, and a whole range of guest speakers. We organize, when possible, field trips, depending, of course, on the restrictions imposed by the pandemic. We have a very close working relationship with the Global Legal Action Network, or GLAN, which is located at the centre and which engages with our students on various international cases that I'll talk about later. And we also have an International Human Rights Law Clinic, which I'll discuss a little bit later also. So we regard ourselves as leading the future change in human rights, insofar as we're not just an academic institution. That's our primary purpose, is to provide education, to give people the academic and necessary background to work in various fields, internationally, regionally, and nationally. But we also are engaged ourselves in the practical implementation of human rights and advocacy issues. So there are a limited number of students at the centre, semester have the opportunity to participate in the International Human Rights Law Clinic. And the clinic provides students with a unique practical training on mobilizing human rights standards to secure reform, engaging human rights bodies at the UN and regional levels. So to date, projects that they have worked on include publishing secondary school teaching materials, recommending statutory time limits for decisions on international protection applications. International protection applications refers to those seeking refugee status in Ireland and elsewhere, developing a report on human rights implications of period poverty, proposing the establishment of a legislative ban on importing fracked gas, and publishing and delivering a report to the Minister for Children which analysed the impact of children's rights of Ireland's reception system for asylum seekers known as direct provision. So you can see the issues that students engage in are varied and of great contemporary relevance. In addition, we have the placement opportunities with the Global Legal Action Network, which is a unique non-profit organization that pursues innovative legal actions across borders, challenging states and other powerful actors involved in human rights violations. So students have the opportunity to apply for a placement and work with GLAN over the period when they're students. Here, the students have been involved in case submissions to the European Court of Human Rights, monitoring airstrikes in the armed conflict taking place in Yemen, and examining the potential perpetrators and consequences of those airstrikes, looking at issues of forced labor in Europe, indigenous people's rights in the Western Sahara, which some of you may know is seeking independence from Morocco, and then rights of migrants at sea and the controversy about the Mediterranean and the policing of the Mediterranean and the issues that are arising from those seeking a better life or indeed fleeing from persecution in Asia, Africa and elsewhere, and using the Mediterranean as a route into Europe. Yeah. So just to finish then on this, it's just to mention and recognize the Law Student of the Year award last year was made to Cassie Roddy Molyneux, an LLM, an International Human Rights graduate and data rights solicitor. And Cassie was part of the Human Rights Centre's representative team at Ireland's United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination Review. She also worked in the Human Rights Clinic on My Data Rights project, an online resource to help survivors of historical and institutional abuses in Ireland use the data protection laws to access their personal data. And she also completed a legal research placement with the Global Legal Action Network and did work relating to business and human rights abuses. Thanks, Leanne. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Professor Shane Darcy, to tell you something about the LLM program in international criminal law. Shane?
Okay, thanks, Ray. And hi to all of you that have come along to hear about the LLM programs, well, two particular LLM programs at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. So I'm Shane Darcy. I'm a professor at the Irish Centre for Human Rights, where I teach international criminal law. I teach other related subjects, so procedure before international criminal courts. I teach a business and human rights module, and I do a climate justice module. So I'm the program director for the LLM in international criminal law. So for those of you that might be unfamiliar with international criminal law, well, what is it? It's a body of international law that's aimed at addressing and holding to account individuals accused of international crimes, specifically crimes against humanity, crimes of genocide, war crimes, or the crime of aggression. So it's a particularized body of international law that developed in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War with the prosecution of German and Japanese military and political leaders at Nuremberg, for example. But really it came into its current existence in the late 1990s with the advent of various international tribunals, most notably the International Criminal Court, which is a permanent court that sits in The Hague. In terms of what the LLM does, it seeks to familiarize and exchange knowledge with you on the law, the institutions, a little bit of the politics, and certainly some of the history around the development of international criminal law. So it's of interest to those of you that might want to work in the field of international criminal justice. Although that being said, it's not exclusively something to work at the International Tribunal. So we have some students that have gone on to work at the International Criminal Court or at some of the related institutions, but also students have gone on to work for NGOs, civil society organizations, or national governments, or intergovernmental organizations, many of whom have an interest in international criminal law as a means of holding to account individuals for the most serious violations of human rights. Across the module, or across the degree, I would say, you would take a compulsory module on international criminal law, and then you would choose some other modules that are run at the center that are related. So international humanitarian law, which would address issues around armed conflict, procedure before international criminal courts, which I mentioned, and then various other modules, some of which would tie in quite directly. So Leanne has just posted up there some of the issues, or some of the modules, I should say, that you could choose from. So international criminal law, as I say, it's a very kind of specific body of international law, but it draws on other areas of international law. So for example, I just mentioned international humanitarian law, which is the law governing armed conflict, the context in which war crimes might be committed. But also, these are trials of individuals at these international courts, so human rights law is relevant as well. In other words, they should be subjected to fair trials. So what are those rights? And then other areas of international law, refugee and migration studies, for example, involve population flows that may involve international crimes. So events we're seeing in Bangladesh and Myanmar, offshore detention of migrants, some of these instances have involved international crimes and have come to the attention of the International Criminal Court. In terms of some of the, I suppose, features of the LLM itself, Ray has already touched on some of these, which would include our annual field trip to The Hague, where we, COVID permitting, have gone to visit the International Criminal Court in the past, visit the International Court of Justice, and visit some of the other international criminal tribunals also. We have an annual summer school on the International Criminal Court, which is a week-long event that is run here at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And actually, for those of you that are considering the LLM, the summer school is a great way to get a flavour of the sorts of subjects that we would cover in the LLM itself. The summer school is a week-long event. There's a very reduced rate for NUIG students, so not just students that are already studying on the LLM, but all NUIG students. And it gives you a flavour of the types of crimes you're addressing, what the trials are addressing, and some of the politics around the International Criminal Court as well. The dates are usually in the middle of June, and if you keep an eye on our website, they will be announced then. It's a 1-year full-time degree or a 2-year part-time degree. So if you skip on to the next slide, Leanne, we have the modules, which I've mentioned already a little bit. You have your compulsory International Criminal Law module, semester 1. You pick 2 others then, and then in semester 2, you pick a range of modules adding up to 30 credits. And then over the summer, you'd work on your minor thesis, your dissertation, which is essentially a research project under the supervision of a member of staff in the field of international criminal law. Just want to skip on then to the next slide there, Leanne, thank you. So just in terms of careers, I've mentioned this a little bit. So students have come to the LLM already working in some of these fields. So we have some current students who are working with civil society organizations who want to increase their understanding of international justice and human rights issues. We've had in the past members of staff from some of the tribunals who perhaps worked. We had an investigator who had no legal background and wanted to understand the legal framework of the International Criminal Court, for example, but it also works the other ways then. And then some of our graduates have gone on to work for United Nations bodies, international criminal tribunals, as mentioned, or for NGOs who are increasingly focusing on international justice and human rights issues. So Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as nationally based NGOs would all have in-house expertise on international criminal law. And as well then governments, so the Department of Foreign Affairs here and certainly larger states would have individuals working for them whose brief would be to follow the work of the tribunals, particularly if the state itself is involved in proceedings before some of the International Criminal Court in particular. I'm not sure, is there any other slides from me, Leanne?
No, that's everything.
Okay, thanks, Leanne. So that's the International Criminal Law, LLM. There may be some questions at the end, or will we wait for questions, Ray, or will we will we plow on?
I think we'll go ahead. I'll talk about the peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict, LLM, and then we'll take questions at the end. Again, you're back to me, Ray Murphy, and I, like Shane, I direct this particular program on peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict. So it's a unique program which looks at the connections between peace operations, humanitarian law and conflict. There's a huge focus on the United Nations and on the activities of the United Nations. And obviously, we talk a lot about peacekeeping operations, peace building, and all those related activities, which most often take place internationally under the rubric of the United Nations. One of the questions that I'm often asked from prospective students is, do you need a law degree to apply for this program? And the answer emphatically is no, you do not. You do not need a law background, and all of the subjects that you can take for this particular program will be taught in a way which makes them readily understandable to somebody with no law background. So the program focuses, as I said, on UN peacekeeping and related operations to provide insights into peace operations and conflict resolution frameworks. When we don't have the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, we have field trips to the military barracks and we engage with the Irish Defence Forces, who have significant peacekeeping experience since the 1950s, and also have built up a significant amount of expertise in international humanitarian law. So international humanitarian law, as I think Shane alluded to in the presentation on international criminal law, is the law or rules governing armed conflict and the situation where force may be used. You know, there's a lot of controversy at present about some of the airstrikes in Yemen. There was a very significant controversy raised by the New York Times about the strike against a would-be supposed terrorist in Afghanistan a couple of weeks ago during the American withdrawal, which actually turned out to be a family, and 9 members of a family were killed in a drone strike. Those types of incidents raise fundamental questions of international humanitarian law and the rules governing international humanitarian law. And of course, as it's the legal framework that governs armed conflict situations, it's directly related to peace operations and to conflict resolution. So the next slide there, Leanne, please. Here's a range of the other modules that are available, but the core modules are mandatory. You must take the module on peacekeeping operations, and you must take the module on international humanitarian law, because they're the foundation upon which this particular program is based. And then there's a range of other modules which I usually advise students in the first week or so in terms of what their particular interests are, which may be taken alongside the mandatory subjects. And as Shane said, with regard to the end of the course, you must complete a dissertation, and the dissertation is a substantial thesis of 15,000 words. In fact, most of the modules are examined by way of research assignments rather than the more traditional exam paper format. So please go ahead there, Leanne. So what do graduates do? This is actually one of the more difficult questions to always answer, because students have gone in so many different directions over the years. Usually I have members of the Irish military or defence forces, and sometimes some members of the police, and they have pretty their career path is generally determined before they start to study for the LLM program. But most often students end up working for international organizations. For example, to begin working in the United Nations often requires students to apply to be part of the UNV system, United Nations Volunteers, which is a paid program, but it allows students and graduates to gain the experience, which is often a prerequisite for a full-time permanent type position in any of these organizations. Many work for non-governmental organizations and as individual advocates. Some have, most have worked for the UN, some have gone to work for the EU. One or two actually have ended up working for NATO, which has always surprised me. And then some from the other, outside of Europe, have ended up working for the African Union and have worked mostly in civilian capacities, both in human rights and in rule of law. And those areas, because peacekeeping now has, of course, a military component, but it has a very substantial civilian component. And most of the students end up working in some kind of civilian capacity with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe or some similar organization in places like the Congo, Haiti, Liberia, Kosovo, wherever. Leanne, please, next slide.
That's everything
Okay.
from that program, Ray. I just want to say thanks very much, Ray and Shane. That was great insight into those LLM programs. Now I'm just going to briefly talk about making it an application before we open it up to questions. So applications are currently open and you can apply online at nuigalway.ie/apply. So the entry requirements for these programs. So the Irish Centre for Human Rights welcomed applications from graduates in a range of disciplines, including law, political science, social science, and humanities. And in cases where applicants come from a non-law background, the Irish Centre for Human Rights will consider your academic background, your relevant work experience, your references, and a personal statement. So applicants must normally have attained a primary degree level at a result of a 2-1, so a second class honours grade 1 or equivalent. And however, those falling short of this standard may be considered where they can demonstrate other appropriate academic accomplishments, such as relevant work experience. So students are encouraged to apply as early as possible, as offers are issued on a continuous basis. So applications are reviewed and accepted on a rolling basis. So it is encouraged to apply as early as possible. Then in terms of scholarships, so we just wanted to make sure you're aware of some of the scholarship opportunities that you might look into pursue to help you fund your studies. So we have the TOT postgrad scholarship for EU students. So these are worth €1,500 and you are eligible to apply if you've been accepted into a full-time postgrad TOT course at NUI Galway and you have attained a 1-1, a first class honours in your level A primary degree. So the applications for this scholarship will open in spring of 2022. We also have a range of international scholarships. So the university offers 20 merit-based scholarships worth €2,000 to non-EU applicants who've been offered a place on their chosen course. There's also country-specific scholarships, Government of Ireland scholarships, and Irish Aid Fellowship Training Programme scholarships. So there's more information on these scholarships on the website. And so if you want to find out more about the Irish Centre for Human Rights, you can visit the website at NUI Galway. And you can follow them on their Facebook and Twitter accounts. You can keep up to date with what's happening in terms of research and news. So I'm just going to come out of the presentation now and welcome Pauline and Saskia.
Hey.
Thanks very much for joining today. So Pauline is a recent graduate of our LLM International Criminal Law. So if you'd just like to introduce yourself, Pauline, and tell us a bit about your experience studying at NUI Galway.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Pauline. I'm originally from Germany, and as already mentioned by Leanne, I just completed the International Criminal Law LLM at the Irish Centre for Human Rights. And currently, I'm a part-time junior research associate with the Public International Law and Policy Group, and do simultaneously a second master's in international crime, conflict, and criminology, since the program at the Irish Centre just increased my thirst for knowledge. And I have to say, my experience at the center was really great, albeit everything was online due to COVID. All the professors were really approachable, and the participation in the different modules really enriched my knowledge, but also my skills in an academic setting. Since the examination is largely based on research papers, I was able to develop profound research skills and also develop more critical thinking. And this is something that might help you a lot when you're trying to get a job, because most entry job levels are research-based, because you first have to gain experience and to gain knowledge to then further move on to more practical matters in a lot of cases. So that was really positive for me.
And I know you completed a placement with GLAN. Could you just tell us a bit more of that experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. So throughout the entire year, I did a placement with GLAN, and there I worked on a team in relation to human rights abuses and the international economy, more specifically the Irish stock market exchange. And it was really enriching to work like in a team of all young aspiring lawyers and under the guidance of some really experienced individuals in strategic litigation, because there you can also learn some practical skills you might not get from a strictly academic experience like you get in the program. So it's really a good, like it's complementary to the studies itself. And it gets you into like the more practical oriented thinking about problem sets. So that was really good. And also time management wise, it was well combinable, and often what you learned in the courses fed into what you had to do for GLAN and vice versa. So that was a really positive experience as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Pauline. And I know you're working now as a junior research associate at the Public International Law and Policy Group. Could you just tell us a little bit about what your role entails and just like your day-to-day activities?
Sure. So I can't go into too much detail because of confidentiality issues. But in general, I work in the global justice team, which is focused on justice matters in post-conflict and transitional contexts. So there are client communities, those can be either state or civil society communities who come to PILPG, that's the acronym for the organization, and ask for expertise and advice. And then PILPG draws up memorandums and also assists in negotiations to settle their issues. Currently, a large project focuses on the domestic implementation of international criminal law by means of universal jurisdiction. Yeah, that's a project I'm working on currently.
It sounds very interesting. Thanks for that insight, Pauline. That was great. So Saskia, I know you're a current student of the LLM Peace Operations Humanitarian Law and Conflict Programme. So I just wanted to ask, why did you choose to study the LLM at NUI Galway and how does it stand out from other Irish universities?
Yeah, thanks, Leanne, for having me. Just a short background information about myself. Well, I did my undergraduate in Germany as well, like Pauline, and I studied international relations. And during my undergraduate, I had some classes in public international law, so that was what caught my eye a little bit to go deeper into the field of human rights, but especially humanitarian law. And during my Erasmus semester in Belfast, I was able to do more about conflict studies, security studies. So I really wanted to go into the field of conflict studies to see how is it all connected, and then having a legal focus on it, seeing the peacekeeping system and how all of this is connected, how it works out. And for example, looking at transitional justice, what can we do about peace building after conflicts? And when I was looking for an LLM program, I wanted to study in a country where I could study in English, and I was looking at Ireland, and then I saw this specific case and this specific LLM program, and I was really just like overwhelmed, because I thought, wow, someone thought about exactly what I wanted to do, having a connection between the United Nations system, having humanitarian law, and having the possibility to also study human rights. So to see this broader picture of all of public international law. So then I had a chat with Professor Ray last year as well. And after that, I was really sure I wanted to study here and at the Irish Centre for Human Rights.
That's great. And so what parts of the LLM are you enjoying the most?
Well, in general, I'm just enjoying the classes to gain a lot of knowledge, being able to discuss with all the classmates, with the professors, and it's a lot of workload because we don't have lectures. So what we have is seminars. They're 3 hours a week. So we have to prepare the classes, right? You have a lot of readings, but then you're able to build on these readings and to discuss on the basis of what you've read, what you've learned in the week and the prior week. And what I enjoy the most is this semester I'm studying humanitarian law, peace operations, and international criminal law. So to see how they are connected, it's not I have one class and then I go to another class without even seeing a connection between, but all of them, they come together, and just seeing how this picture grows every day, every week. It's just amazing. And I like especially having a lot of international students around from different backgrounds, different experiences. Some have worked prior to coming back to the university, so they bring extra experiences. And then we have some students just like me who just finished their bachelor's. So it's really great to have the interaction and the lunch seminars to learn about the work of practitioners, to have the chance to talk to them and to talk to other academics, and just like the big picture, which I'm really happy to be here.
That's great. And I know you're coming from Germany, so I'd just like to ask you, like, what's your experience of Galway as a city to live and study in?
Galway is really beautiful. Like, I had to get used a little bit to the weather. September was really kind to me because we had a lot of sunny days, which was unusual, I was told by my Irish roommate. But the landscape is beautiful, and you can do a lot in Galway, around Galway, especially if you join societies and clubs. For example, I joined the Mountaineering Club, and they go hiking every Sunday. So I just came back from a hike on the Sunday. It was really beautiful. Just find a good balance, a good mix between doing the academic work, enjoying yourself being here, getting to know people, connect with people. And yes, it's like I love being close to the sea, having my daily walks to Salthill. So that's just great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it is really important to know that while college is primarily about education, like the university does offer over 50 sports clubs and over 115 student societies. So there really is something there for everyone. And so we'll just open it up to questions that any of you may have. You're welcome to put it into the chat or unmute yourselves and put a question to any of our panelists. I don't think we have any so far.
Hello, I have a short question actually. Thank you so much, first of all, for the input, and it was also really nice hearing the input of Saskia and Pauline. It's actually quite funny because I also study international relations in Germany right now, and Saskia told me about the program, and I was actually just wondering about how many people apply in average for the program. Yeah, that's it.
So Ray.
Yeah, actually the Peace Operations, Humanitarian Law and Conflict Program and the International Criminal Law Program have about 12 or 10 to 12 candidates every year selected. We don't have a set number of places. It depends really on the qualifications and experience of the candidates, but those programs would have an average of about 10 or 12 students each year. But it would be important to emphasize for some of the modules that we teach, they're taught to all the LLM programs. So if you're doing, for example, international human rights, you would share that module with the international human rights students and anybody else from the other programs that wanted to take it. And just an example there of Saskia, she studied international criminal law this year, which is actually one of the primary foundation courses for international criminal law, but it's linked to her particular interests, and it's also relevant to peacekeeping and related activities. But anyway, to answer the question specifically, about 10 or 12 students each year are admitted to both of these programs.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, we have another question. We are Stephanie and Shannon. We also studied international relations in Mexico City. And I have a question regarding the scholarships because we both have double nationalities. So can we apply for the EU national, the scholarship that gives to citizens as both nationalities, even though that we have both?
I'm not too certain on that, but I don't think so. I think it's just one scholarship per person. I will put in the link. There is an web page on the website, and that breaks down each country and how many applicants receive that scholarship, the fee or how much that value of that scholarship, and the details to apply to that. So I'll send the link into the chat for that, and you'll have a breakdown of each scholarship scheme, if that helps.
Okay. And the other question that I have is, what happens if there are only 12 or 10 students? What happens if there are not enough students for one module? Like, for example, business and human rights. What happened? Like, all of those modules, they open up every single.
Okay, that's a good and it's a practical question. To be honest, for that module, there will always be enough students. Trust me, I know this from experience. Just as and for the mandatory modules such as international criminal law or peacekeeping or international humanitarian law, irrespective of the number of students, we will put those programs on or those modules. But you are right. I mean, we list there a range of subjects, but we don't offer all of those subjects every year. And it's not so much numbers dependent. Sometimes, for example, next year, my colleague, Dr. Anita Ferrari, will not be here. So we probably will not be able to offer the module Transitional Justice because that's her particular field of expertise. And so we generally just don't teach subjects. We teach subjects that we have built up a degree of expertise in, and we also may have worked in that field, and we conduct research in that field. And that's very important at a master's level program. So we don't guarantee all of those subjects, but for the most part, especially, you just mentioned business and human rights, that's a subject that's very popular, very topical, and I can assure you it will be available next year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just copied the link for the postgrad scholarships into the chat there as well. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah.
No problem.
So we were wondering if we can apply already, because we thought the system had broke down a little bit for the applications online. So we were wondering if we could already pay for our fees for the application.
If you've already applied, I think they were getting back to applicants in the next coming days. So have you been responded to by your applications yet? And if you haven't, they're doing that process over the next week.
All right. Well, the problem is that we
haven't applied.
No.
Oh, you
Like
have
the
to
system,
apply.
the system is not receiving the payments to a problem. So the application is like standby until they receive the application fee.
Yeah, okay. Now, this is a strange thing. The actual application process, the paper process, is subcontracted to an agency outside the university. But when the applications are ready, they're forwarded to a committee to review. Now, yes, because we've sustained a cyber attack, our systems are really actually pretty chaotic to some extent. But if you apply, and I think it's at €50, I think, to apply, is that the fee that you're talking about?
That's 30, 35.
30.
Or 35, yeah, 35. Yeah, we're making significant progress in restoring all our systems. So my advice would be to apply and leave it in the system, and when it's fully operational to then give the €35. But the sooner you apply, the better. But there is plenty of time, and I will assure you that we'll sort out this particular problem. And when it is restored, we're pretty prompt at offering places. And sometimes students are awaiting results. And what we do there is we give conditional offers. If you're going to graduate this year, if you achieve a minimum grade in your final examinations, we say that you are guaranteed a place. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we do apologize for the current chaotic system due to the cyber attack, but it is actually, already we've made significant progress in resolving the technical issues, but we're not fully there yet. But priority is given to the application system, and we will deal with it as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, thanks, and thank you for your patience. Can I just say then, because unless there are further questions, a special thanks to Saskia and Pauline, who agreed to share their particular knowledge, because much as I might like to feel I can convey to you what it's like, the student experience is a unique one, and it's a long time since I was a student, not so long maybe since Shane, but in my case a very long time. And so having both of them agree to share that knowledge and experience with you, we greatly appreciate it. And thank you for your interest. I hope you do apply, and I might see you in September of next year, who knows.
Yeah, I think we might close it up there. I don't see any more questions coming in, but yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone, all the speakers and the program directors that joined here today. I hope you found this session informative, and that you now have a clear sense and insight into what program might best align to your career development. And if you do have any more questions, you can always email us via our website, and we will get the information will be renewed and updated in the coming weeks. And so just to close it off, we hope to welcome you here as postgrad students at NUI Galway next September. So I'm just going to stop recording.